Hello and welcome to the second computer science video for the periodics. Let's just start with the questions. Which of the following is true about serial simplex data transmission? Serial data transmission is basically transmission of data across one wire, so eliminate anything that has to do anything with more than one wire. And simplex is only in one direction, which means this is the answer because it mentions one bit at a time in one wire in one direction. Which of the following ensures that the field is not left empty? Which of the following ensures that the field is not left empty? With this type of check, you need something that checks if it's there or not, which is the presence check. Study the algorithm below. It's supposed to input four numbers, add them together, and display their sum. And here's the given pseudocode, and the program does not work as it should. Which of the following should be changed for the program to work correctly? Usually with these questions, you need to properly understand what's given, which is the user wants to input four numbers and add them together and display their sum. So what you should do is something called dry run. We're gonna take it later, but basically you just go through this entire program thinking what it should do. So first, counter and sum are both set to 0, and since counter is less than 3, it will initiate this loop. The user will input a number, this number is added to sum, and there will be a counter loop, which adds 1 to this. So now counter will now become 1, sum will become a random number, let's say x, which is a number the user input. And then after this, it will do again. Is 1 is indeed less than 3, so it will repeat this loop. The user inputs another number, it adds that number to whatever sum is, and the counter is incremented by 1. So counter then becomes 2, sum becomes, let's say, x plus y, and then you basically repeat this loop. 2 is indeed less than 3, it will repeat this loop. The user adds a number, the number is the user inputs a number, the number then gets added to whatever the sum is, counter gets incremented, and then it repeats 3. Here's the problem now. We wanted to input 4 numbers. However, we were only allowed to input 3 numbers. So what you should do is change this number by 1, which is represented by this option. So you choose this one. Consider the following code. The code above is supposed to input positive numbers only. It does not accept any negative numbers, and then output their average. When a 0 is entered, the process should stop. To make the code work as intended, what should replace the missing statement on line number 9? With these types of questions, like I said, you just have to read through the pseudocode and try to understand what it's doing, or just understand it from the given. So what it's doing right now is it's inputting the user's inputting numbers and is outputting their average. Now when you read through this, you'll notice that there's no counter incrementing statement. The counter only ever gets set to 0, but it's never changed again, which usually, if you divide a number by 0, you'll either get infinity or a math error. To avoid this, the counter variable will be incremented, which is represented by this option. A piece of pseudocode was written to calculate the sum of 5 entered numbers and then output their sum. How many errors are found in the pseudocode above? As I said, you have to analyze everything. Sum is equal to 0. This is what you should do anytime you set a variable to something. Whenever you declare a variable, you should always set it to either 0 or an empty string or something like that. There are some few exceptions, however, it's not really important to get into it right now. For counts 1 to 10, this is the loop that will allow the user to input numbers. However, it's from 1 to 10. We don't want it to be from 1 to 10, we want it to be 5 numbers, so it would be like 0 to 5 or 1 to 5, I don't know, pseudocode is confusing sometimes. So here's our first error. Let me just put an X beside it too. Input number, this is correct. Number equals sum, this is an error. What this should be is sum is equal to sum plus number, because that's how you total variables. Count equals count plus 1, that seems to make sense. However, there is a next count which is necessary for for loops. When there's a for loop, it's not necessary for a counter statement to be here, so you can just immediately eliminate counters. This one. So this gives us another error. And then here they say they want to output their sum. Here it's outputting the amount of number of times this loop was repeated. So this should be the final error. So therefore, there are 4 errors in the pseudocode. All of the following are true about ARQ except... Okay, so let's say we have these 2 machines and they want to communicate to each other via ARQ or automatic repeat requests. In simple, what it does is this this machine will send data to the other machine. Let's say this is that piece of data, and it moves to there from the sending machine to the receiving machine. The receiving machine will then send an acknowledgement within a certain time frame known as the timeout. If this machine does not get the acknowledgement within a certain timeout, it will assume the transmission has failed and resend it until either one of 2 things happens. It reaches the maximum amount of times it has been allowed to send the data, or it finally receives a positive acknowledgement. Knowing this, let's answer this question. After transmission, a message is sent by the receiver indicating that the data has been correctly received. This is true. The method uses acknowledgements to achieve reliable data transmission. Once again true. It is a data transmission error detection method. Yes. The method uses timeouts, the time by which an acknowledgement is sent. This is true. Since all of these were true, we can obviously just choose the last one because the process of elimination. Which of the following best describes parity check? Let us take this example again. 2 machines want to transmit data, but this time they'll use the error detection method known as parity checks. This machine wants to send 01001011. And obviously, for parity checks, before any of the data transmission occurs, both of them agree on either an odd or an even parity. An odd parity requires that there be an odd amount of ones in the data being transmission, and even requires an even amount of ones to be transmitted in the data. Let's say that these 2 machines agree on even transmission. So before sending it, it will append a bit depending on how many ones there are. Since we want even, there should be an even amount of ones. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 ones, so we shouldn't change the number of ones here. So we'll add a parity bit of 0. This then gets transmitted to the other machine. And that's really it for parity check. So knowing this, we can finally answer this question. And this is the option that represents what I just explained. It is used to check transmission errors by checking whether the number of bits with the ones is transmitted and the transmitted byte is even or odd. All of the following are true about checksum, except let's say these 2 machines let's say this machine wants to send something to this machine, and they use checksum detection. What they do is they agree on a calculation to do on the bits received. So first, what it will do is do the calculation on it. Let's say they get 35 from this calculation. The method they use to calculate it, alongside the number they got from this calculation, will be sent to the other machine. So all of this gets sent to the other machine. And then using this algorithm they both decided on, it will then try to do these calculations on the byte received. If it gets 35, then that means it was transmitted correctly. Otherwise, there was an error in transmission. Knowing this, let us answer this question. If the checksum calculated before the transmission is the same as that calculated after the transmission, the transmission is error-free. This is true. A checksum is used to check if there is an error in transmission. That's the point of the detection error methods. The checksum is calculated again after data is received. Yes, as we could see, the receiver the receiver machine did recalculate the data. The checksum is calculated before the data is sent and transmits with the data. This is also true. We saw that the sender machine calculated, did the calculations on the byte, and in addition it sent this method alongside the data. If the checksum calculated before the transmission is the same as the calculated after transmission, then the data must be resent. This is false. If they both match, then there's no problem. What is the purpose of the pseudocode given below? Usually with these types of questions, you want to read every line, or not really every line, but try to understand what this program is doing. So first, it sets total and count to 0. This usually isn't important, but just keep it in mind. And it will repeat this loop until n is greater than 0. But how would n be greater than 0? There's an input here. The user will input a number that should be greater than 0 to continue on with the program. Once it gets out of this repeat loop, it will go into another repeat loop. It will ask the user to input any number. It creates a counter variable, or it increments a counter variable, and it totals the number input. And it does this until the count is equal to n. So we want to try to see which statement matches what you tried to explain here. It continuously asks the user to enter numbers until a negative number or 0 is entered. It then calculates and displays their sum. Although yes, the sum is indeed displayed, this part makes it false. It does not check. It does indeed check if there's a negative, or it does. It does indeed ask the user to input numbers, but it asks them until the number is not negative or 0. It asks the user to enter n numbers, then calculates and displays their sum. This is basically what I tried to explain here. It asks the user to enter n numbers, which is defined by the user by this piece of code, and then calculates their sum and displays it. While, and while, repeat, until, and for, next are all examples of repetition statements. They basically just repeat the statements indented inside of them until certain conditions are met. The for next loop is a loop that does the statements for a predefined number of times. Basically what this means is, because the way the for loop works, it basically works by you give it a number of times to repeat this, and then using that to just repeat the loop, and that's really it. The while and while is a loop that may not iterate. Here's why. Because the condition is checked before the loop is done, there could very well be a possibility such that the while, or the condition, does not meet the requirements for the while loop to go. So it will just skip this loop, meaning that it will not iterate. By the way, iterate means loop. The while and while is a loop that checks the condition first and then does the statements. This is basically, I said something similar to this in the previous question. It checks the statements first and then it does the statements as long as the condition is true. Consider the following pseudocode. The pseudocode must print the message allow access only when the pin is 789 and access denied otherwise. Which of the following completes the pseudocode correctly? First, usually in these types of questions, you should try your best to input or fish out obviously incorrect answers. So first off, you usually never want to input some. It said it wants to print the message, which isn't input, so you can eliminate this option. Second, the variable that's being stored as the user's input is pin, not passwords, so this can also be eliminated. Now you have to decide which one's correct. And also, yeah, in if statements, you usually need to put the then here, which is not here. So you can eliminate the first three ones, meaning you can move on to these two. They say that the pin must be equal to 789. And when this is met, it should print allow access. This is the only one that matches that, because see, if pin is equal to 789, then output allow access, else output access denied. Here it's checking if it's not equal to 789, which you don't want. The case end case is an example of a decision statement that deals with many cases. This is the pseudocode equivalent to the if, elif, else in Python, if you're familiar with Python. And essentially, just if there's more than two cases, you'll usually have to use this. The if and if is an example of a decision statement that deals with one case. There's no else, so it's just one statement that's being checked. The pseudocode statement below declares an area of type what? What type of data is being stored in this area? It's usually here, which is real. So eliminate anything that does not have real in it, which is this is the only one that does not have anything that's real in it. Next, we want to check for the name, and the name is usually here, student grades. So eliminate anything that does not have student grades in it, which is the only one that's here. Now we want to check the size. The size will usually be the bigger number here, but it usually depends on what the index was, or the first index was. Since the first index is 1, you can immediately just take this number as the size of it. So anything that does not have a size of 15, you can just eliminate it, leaving us with these two. Now it's checking what the first index is. Here we said the first index is 1, so eliminate anything that does not have 1 as its answer, leaving us with this option. This is the option that defines this correctly. Which of the following pseudocode statements assigns a value to the number? This is very easy. Which of the following pseudocode statements asks the user to enter a number? When you want a user to enter a number, you'll be using the input or read keywords. So this is the correct answer. Which of the following pseudocode statements declares a variable called number of items that holds a whole number? First, they want to declare it, the number of items, and they want to declare it as a whole number. In other words, it wants to declare it as an integer. So first off, you can immediately eliminate this and eliminate this. You can also eliminate this one because it's not being declared as whether it's a whole number, a decimal number, a string, character, whatever. They never said anything about assigning this variable to a number, so you can eliminate this. Finally, leading us to this as the answer. Which of the following refers to the car data type? Car basically means character, and the character is just like one letter or character or whatever. Basically, yeah, a constant or a variable that holds a single character. This could be like the @ symbol, exclamation mark, the letter A, capital or not capital, whatever. Which of the following refers to the real data type? The real data type is basically decimals, or fractions, you could say, which is this part. A number with a fractional part that can be positive or negative. Also, important thing to note, these variables can either be positive or negative, it doesn't really matter. Which one is a networking device that connects to more different networks? The router is basically responsible for this. It connects two different networks, really. What are the advantages of serial transmission? Basically, like we said, serial transmission is data transmission over a singular wire. We need to see which of these are the advantages. It is fast speed transmission. It is not fast since it's being transmitted over 1 bit. It's being transmitted 1 bit at a time, which means it should be really slow. Although realistically, like it's not that slow, but just compared to parallel, it's just lower. Data reaches the destination in the correct order. This is true because since the bits are being sent one at a time, there's proper order, so therefore there's no mistakes or no mishaps happening in the order. It is simple and reliable. Yeah, because there's just one single wire. There's nothing going to happen. It's very simple. It is cheaper to manufacture, purchase, and install. Once again, this is true because in serial transmission there's just one wire. You won't have to spend you won't have to spend more money on 7 more wires as in parallel. And finally, it can be used over longer distances because in parallel data transmission, you might run into a problem called a skew, where uh, where one of the bytes will arrive late, or one of the bits will arrive late to the family byte, and it will just be counted as something else. Which answer best describes the following statement? Data is transmitted several bits simultaneously down several wires in both directions. First, we'll look at the number of wires. They say several wires, so you can basically eliminate anything that has to do with serial. So this is wrong, and this is wrong. Second, they say simultaneously in both directions. So in both directions, that allows us to immediately eliminate flex parallel, leaving us only with full duplex and half duplex. Since they said simultaneously, we know that the answer should be full duplex, because in full duplex, data is transmitted in both ways simultaneously. What are the main advantages of the USB? Select all that apply. Due to the high demand for USBs, USB support devices are manufactured at relatively low cost. This is true. USBs usually are very cheap, and you can find like maybe 8 USB ports in a computer or something like that. USB supports broadcasting. This is false because although USBs are technically fast, they're not fast enough for like broadcasting. You'd usually use something like Ethernet for broadcasting. USB is the fastest compared to other technologies such as Gigabit Ethernet. As implied from what I said for the previous option, this is wrong. Gigabit Ethernet is much faster than USB, and there's other things that are faster than USB. The USB standard includes an error detection technique that ensures an error-free data transfer. This is true. The connected device can get power supply from the computer to which it is connected. This is also true, because let's say you have a computer, right? And you connect a keyboard to it. Usually the keyboard would require power. But the thing is, you don't need like a dedicated power cable for the keyboard to connect it to an outlet. No, you just connect it directly to the computer and it gets powered on, and it works. A system uses odd parity. Which of the following bytes have been transmitted correctly? In odd parity, that means there must be an odd amount of ones in the byte. So let us check which ones have an odd amount of ones in the byte. This one has 3 ones, which means this passes the odd parity test. This one has 4 ones, so this failed the odd parity. This one has 6, which also fails. This one has also 6, which also fails, and this one has 2, also fails. This is the only one with an odd amount of ones in its byte, so therefore this byte has been transmitted correctly. Which of the following error technique sends the data back again from the destination to source? If the data is sent back as the same as the data sent initially, then the data has been delivered correctly. If the echo data is incorrect, then the original data is resent. You can basically get the answer from this word echo. But in simple, echo check is basically the sender sends data to the receiver. Then the receiver sends this data to the sender to check if it was transmitted correctly. If it wasn't if the sender decides that this data wasn't transmitted the same as how it transmitted, then it will resend the data. Otherwise, data transmission happened perfectly fine. Which of the following is the type of data checking that ensures that data has been copied correctly from one medium to another? So you want to check if data has been properly copied, which is the responsibility of data verification. It verifies if it has been copied properly. What is meant by half duplex? Half duplex is basically data transmission along both directions, but not at the same time. So we'll look for ones. So first off, we'll have to eliminate anything to do with communication channels, because these are for either parallel or serial. And now it leaves us with this. Duplex, meaning 2 ways, so just eliminate this. And we said for half duplex, it's not simultaneously done. So this is also incorrect, leaving us with this. Which of the following are 3 parts of the data packet? Basically, data packets consist of 3 main things: the header, the payload, and the trailer. If you want a deeper explanation for it, I suggest watching a video online about it, or reading a book. What are the disadvantages of parallel transmission? Parallel transmission is basically along 8 communication channels. So let us read through. It is less reliable. This is true. Because of the skewing problem, there's a very high likelihood of errors, so it might be less reliable. Bits are sent in pairs of 2. This is wrong. They're sent in a group of 8. It's suitable only for short distances. This is true, because the longer a parallel transmission is, the more likely it is to fall victim to skewing. Bits may be received in a disorderly manner. Yes, this is basically what skewing is. Bits may be received in a disorderly manner. It is not slow, however, because there's many bits being sent at a time, meaning it should theoretically be faster because this is 8 bits per second, let's say, the other one's 1 bits per second. What is meant by the term parity check? This was answered previously, a method of error detection that appends an additional bit to a byte of data and is based on counting the number of 1 byte. Which of the following are the stages in the SDLC? Select all that apply. There's 4 stages to the SDLC. There's the analysis phase, the design phase, coding phase, and the testing phase. Basically, the analysis phase, all it does is you try to understand the problem. You're trying to understand what you're trying to make. Design code is you're trying to make up a plan for how you are going to approach this problem, which usually is done in either pseudocode, structured diagrams, or flowcharts. Then you code this in any language of your choosing, let's say Python or JavaScript or C#, HTML, there's many. And finally, you test this for problems or bugs. Which SDLC stage allows us to understand what must be solved so that there are no wasted efforts and all functionalities are met. The key word here is to understand what must be solved, which is the analysis phase. You're trying to understand, you're analyzing the problem, which can be used to represent an algorithm. Like I said previously, structured diagrams, flowcharts, or pseudocode may be used to represent an algorithm. Which validation check checks if the data falls within a specified range? The keyword here is range, so you just go for range check. When breaking down a problem, it is important to divide it into the following component parts. Select all that apply. There's 4 main components you need to focus on when breaking down a problem: the inputs, storages, processes, and outputs. Inputs, I think you know that is the user inputs and everything. Same thing with outputs. Processes, all of the the mathematical operations that might be done, all of the logical operations, etc. Storage is any data that has to be stored for the program to work. Which of the following can be used at the beginning and the end of a flowchart? What it's saying here is which of these shapes are used to begin or end the flowchart, which is this. The rectangle with rounded edges is the shape used to end or begin a flowchart. Which of the following can be used for reading data or writing information in the program? Basically, it's asking for which of these can be used for outputting or inputting data, which is this trapezoid or rhombus. Which of the following can be used for reading data or writing information in the parallel part? Which of the following can be used for reading data or writing information in the program? It's this shape, because this question is asking for anything that can either input or output data, which is this shape of responsibility, the parallelogram. Which of the following can be used when the decision has to be made in the program? For decisions, you have to use the rhombus. What is the name of the process of breaking down a problem into simpler problems that are easier to understand? This is decomposition. As implied from the name, decomposition is to break down the problem into simpler steps. Which of the following holds a value that can change within the algorithm? This is a variable. It's basically a memory storage inside the program that holds a value. This variable may change, or this value may change. Which of the following holds a value that does not change within the algorithm? This is a constant. As implied from the name, the value of the variable remains constant. Think of this as a mathematical constant. Like, let's say pi. Pi is always 3.14159, and it will never change. There's also many different constants to use as examples, but just Which of the following is a verification method used when the same data is entered twice and the computer conducts a comparison test? Here the keyword here is twice. Since it's being input twice, this means that it's double entry or input. Which of the following is a verification method used when a data entry operator reads what is typed on the screen and compares it with what is written on a paper? This is sight or visual verification. It's comparing something on the computer to something that's on a piece of paper. This is basically how people before used to store passwords before we could store them on the computer itself. Which of the following refers to the integer data type? A constant or variable that holds a single character. Characters don't have anything to do with the integer because integers are numbers, so you can ignore this. A whole number that can be positive or negative. This is true, because integers are basically whole numbers, either 1, 2, 10, 50, 265, 80. A whole number. A fraction is a real, or is called real. Which of the following refers to the string data type? It's basically a variable that holds a sequence of characters or a sequence of letters. So think of string as a sentence, and sometimes you don't even have to think of it as a sentence, because sometimes the string might be 2 letters long. But a character is it has to be 1 letter long, or 1 character long, more accurately. Which of the following refers to the Boolean data type? Boolean data type is the one that has either true or false. Which of the following pseudocode statements declares a constant called max temperature that holds the value of 40.2? Usually when declaring a constant, you don't have to use the declare, you have to use the constant, which is this one. Okay, let us start off with the second quiz. Which of the following pseudocode statements refers to output? Output, print, because the print is an output keyword. Which of the following is a decision statement that deals with 2 cases? First, you can eliminate anything that is a decision statement, so you can get rid of repeat, get rid of while and end while, leaving you with these 3. Case, as previously mentioned, deals with multiple cases, so this is wrong. If deals only with 1 case, leaving this as the answer, if, else, and if. The pseudocode must print the message, "Congratulations, you passed," only when the exam mark is 60 and above. So first off, it doesn't mention anything about printing something if it doesn't meet this condition. So you can eliminate this final one. Second, it uses the variable mark. So you can't use anything that has grid in it. So this and this are both wrong. Secondly, here input is being used. So this is obviously wrong. Leaving us with this and this. Here it's checking if mark is less than 60, when we should be checking if it's greater than or equal to 60, which is being done by this statement. So this should be the final answer. The pseudocode must print the corresponding letter grade as per the table below. Greater than or equal to 90, prints A. Greater than or equal to 75 and less than 90, prints B. Greater than or equal to 60 and less than 75, print C. Otherwise, print D. Here there are multiple options you can choose from, so you have to choose everything carefully. Here it's if mark is greater than 90 and mark is less than or equal to 100. Here it's instantly false because it should be checking if it's greater than or equal to 90, not only greater than 90. So you can immediately eliminate the first option. Here it checks if it's greater than or equal to 90. If that's true, then it will output A. And then it checks here. However, we're going to face a problem here. Because then, if let's say the user gets inputs 98, it's going to print A, and since it's greater than 75, it will also print B, C, D. You don't want this. You only want to print 1 letter, which is why you eliminate this. And then with this one, it checks if it's greater than or equal to 90 and less than or equal to 100. If that's true, it outputs A. So far, so good. Here, it checks if it's greater than or equal to 75 or less than 90, and it outputs B. And this holds true. This one is a proper way of doing it. However, there's also another way, as you'll see eventually, or just now. If mark is greater than or equal to 90, then output A. The reason why you don't need to include the less than or equal to 100 because it's already included in here. So it will always be, or like the maximum value will always be 100, so you don't have to check for anything, so you don't have to check for this range. And then it's something important to note here, which it isn't really represented well in the quiz. The if is with the else statements. So if this is false, it then checks this. If this is false, it then checks this, and if this is false, then it finally goes to output D. So this is the other option, and there are no other options. The while and while is an example of a precondition loop. It is called a precondition loop because the condition being checked is done before the loop starts iterating. So this is why it's called a precondition, before. The repeat until loop is a loop that does the statements first and then checks the condition, then keeps doing the statements until the condition is true. Basically what it's saying here is that it will repeat the statements until a certain condition is met, which is different from the while loop, because the while loop, it repeats the certain conditions until the while, or the condition for the while loop, becomes false. The repeat until loop is a loop that iterates at least once, because unlike while, it will immediately enter the loop. So it will iterate at least once. The for next is an example of a counter-controlled loop, because the for it's set for a predefined number of times. If it's set for a predefined number of times, it will be controlled by a counter. What is the purpose of the pseudocode given below? First, it will ask the user to input numbers 10 times. It takes these numbers and adds them up and puts them in a variable called result. And then it divides the result by 10, which is the number of numbers the user inputs, and it outputs it. We can eliminate these two because the number of numbers being input is 10. It's known. And same thing here, because negative values aren't being accounted for. It's just inputting any number. Here we need to be careful, because although we see a result plus n here but nothing that averages it, you might be inclined to choose this one. However, this is wrong, and it's displaying their average, because as you can see here, the result is being divided by 10, which is the number of numbers input. So this is why you choose this as the answer. Student names declared below is an array that holds the names of students in a class. What is the purpose of the following pseudocode? So this one was very short and shouldn't really take much time from you. For index 1 to length student names, first it starts with the first index and it prints whatever is in the first index of this array. Then it goes to index number 2. It checks whatever is in the second index and it outprints that and repeats until it reaches the length. Since the first index was 1, that means this should be the total length. Otherwise you'd have to subtract 1 if it starts from 0. So basically all this does is it prints the values stored in the array student names. Here there's something wrong with this question because there's meant to be given statements, so you can just skip this. Something check checks the type of data entered against the required data type. Okay, here it's checking for a specific type of data, which is the type check. It will usually check if this variable or if this input is either a boolean, integer, string, whatever. How many keys are used in symmetric encryption to encrypt and decrypt data? It's important to pay attention to this question because it's asking to encrypt and decrypt data. It's never asking for symmetric encryption in general, it's asking only to encrypt and decrypt data. And in symmetric, since it uses one pair of keys in general, that means it should use only one to encrypt and decrypt data. When data is transmitted over distances, it is usually broken down into data packets. Mention whether each of the following is part of a packet header, payload, or trailer. Here's when we get into deeper depth of the different parts of the data packet. Bits dot mark at the end of the packet. That's the trailer. The trailer is the final part or the back part of the data packet. The actual data to be transmitted is the payload. The payload is usually, this is the only purpose of the payload. It usually only has the data being transmitted. Everything else is for references. The total number of packets being transmitted, that's stored in the header. The packet size and number is also stored in the header. IP address is also stored in the header. Information used for error checking is usually in the trailer. Something data transmission is when 8 bytes are sent simultaneously using 8 wires. The keyword or like the hint here is 8 wires. 8 wires implies that there's many communication channels, meaning that this is parallel data transmission. Something is when data is transmitted 1 bit at a time down a single wire. Here we have single wire, so that means it should be serial. However, it's transmitted both directions but not at the same time. So this must mean that the data transmission being used here is half-duplex serial or serial half-duplex. Something is when data is transmitted in one direction only 1 bit at a time down a single wire. So here down a single wire, so it should be serial. In one direction only, that should be simplex. Something is a method of error detection where value is calculated from a block of data and sent with the block of data during transmission. All it's saying here basically is with a given piece of data that wants to be transmitted, it will do a calculation on this piece of data to get a number. Once you get this number, the number achieved from the calculations and the calculation itself will be sent to the receiver, and the receiver will do all of these again and compare it to the number achieved from the calculations. If it's true, then data was transmitted correctly. This error detection method is called a checksum. Something is a standardized interface that was designed to connect a computer to its peripherals to supply electric power and send and receive data using serial transmission. The universal serial bus, or aka the USB, that's the one that was. This is the standardized interface. What's the process of converting data into a format that is readable only by the destination device, thereby protecting it from unauthorized interception or access? Checksum, that's used for error detection, so this is completely false, you can get rid of it. Data verification, that's something else entirely. Automatic repeat requests, like I said, that's an error detection. Data validation, that's something else entirely, leaving us with encryption. Encryption is the process of converting data into a format that is readable only by the destination device. Something uses two different keys, a public and a private. This is asymmetric encryption. Asymmetric encryption usually uses only two pairs of keys. Parity checks are used to check for errors during transmission. A system uses even parity. What should the values of A and B so that both the following 2 bytes have an even parity? So before answering this, you should count the number of ones inside each bit. So in this one, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 bits. We want it to be even, so you have to choose 1. And then here you can count the number of bits, or here you have to count the number of bits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 bits, which is odd. You want to make it even, so add another 1. Serial data transmission is when 1 bit is sent down via 1 cable. Something is when data is transmitted several bits at a time down several wires. Keyword here is several wires, so this should be parallel. It's in both directions but one at a time. This means that this is half duplex. What is the original text before encryption? It's the plain text. The plain text, that means that there's no encryption algorithms done in it. It's like the completely normal thing. Something is the text after encryption. This is called the encryption text, or encryption, or ciphertext more accurately. Ciphertext is the text after encryption, because this is the encryption. This is the text that has. Something is the process of converting the encrypted text back to its original. You're decrypting it. You're getting rid of the encryption. Decryption. To encrypt the data, a string of characters is used known as the encryption key. Something is a type of encryption that uses a single key to encrypt and decrypt data. This was answered previously. This is symmetric encryption. Something is a type of encryption that uses one public key and one private key, one to encrypt and one to decrypt. This is the asymmetric encryption method. A value transmitted at the end of a block data is calculated using the other elements in the data stream and is used to check for transmission errors. Keyword here is calculations. Calculations is usually associated with the checksum. An even or an odd number of bits set to 1 in a byte, used to check if the byte has been transmitted correctly. Keyword here is even or odd number of bits. This is what the parity check does. It checks if there's an even or odd number of ones inside the bits or bytes. Requires sending the data twice. If the two copies of the data are the same, then the data has no errors. Usually, this is the echoing back, because in the echoing back you send the data twice, once forward and once backwards. A positive acknowledgement is to be sent within a time limit. This is the automatic repeat request using acknowledgements, and it uses acknowledgements and the timeout. USBs use a protocol that allows for error-free transmission between device and computer. True. It's not, and the longest cable length supported by the USB is 10 meters or less. This is false. It's 5 meters or less actually. USB uses parallel data transfer. False, because there's only 2 wires in there, one for the forward direction and one for the backward. USB connections can transfer data using half duplex or full duplex. Is it true? 5 statements representing the steps that happen when a checksum occurs. Give each number indicating its order in the process. So first, the sender uses a block of data to compute the checksum. So this should be the first one. It then sends this value, or like the data that was originally meant to be sent, alongside the result of an algorithm, with the algorithm being sent. The receiver then the receiver takes that block of data, does the same algorithms, and just does the same algorithms, and then it checks if they match. And if they don't match, that means that there was an error and has to be retransmitted again. Now we're going to do parity check. First, they decide if they want odd or even parity. So here. Then the sender adds a bit to every byte to make it either even or odd. That's the second step. The sender then sends it to the receiver with the added binary data or bits. So this is the third step. The receiver tests the parity of the received bytes against the agreed upon parity. That's the fourth step. And then finally, if that was faulty, then the receiver demands the data be resent, otherwise it's completely fine. Something is the process of removing irrelevant and unnecessary details from the problem to make it simpler and easier to understand and solve. This is the abstraction. Abstraction is the process of removing irrelevant and unnecessary details. This I briefly explained in the last quiz, but let's just go over it quickly. Input, values entered into the system. Output, information that is produced and displayed to the user. Processes, tasks done on the input. And storage, data that needs to be saved on a file or any other medium for future reference. Enriched SDLC stage is the stage in which large problems are decomposed into smaller sub-problems. Which SDLC stage involves using a programming language to write code known as a source code. This is the coding phase. Which validation check checks if data has the required length. Keyword is length, so you choose the length check. Click the shape that is used for arithmetic operations. The one used for arithmetic operations is the rectangle, but just not the one with the two other rectangles on the side. You choose this one and not this one. This is for subroutines. Click on the shade that is used for named subroutines or modules that are defined somewhere else. Then we choose this because this is the subroutine or the module. Something are used to ensure that the data is valid and is thus acceptable for process. Keyword here, valid, so they use validation checks. A data structure that contains numerous data items of the same data type is known as an array. That's basically it. Should be basically it. I hope you understood. If you don't understand anything, please do contact me via WhatsApp if you want me to explain something to you. And have a nice day.